The Summon Raging Spirit Guardian is one of the easiest to level, construct, and play League starter builds currently in Path of Exile. It leverages the power of the Guardian's Unwavering Crusade notable to give its minions a level 27 Anger, Hatred, and Wrath aura all together, allowing us to focus most of our mana reservation on defenses. Speaking of which, by layering spell suppression, attack and spell block, lots of physical damage shifting, and very high life regeneration through the Time of Need passive, this is an incredibly sturdy build. Once fully constructed, it is effectively a one-button build that feels like a hybrid minion caster archetype that summons temporary, aggressive minions that seek out and destroy your enemies. It is solo self-found hardcore viable. I played up to level 88 in SSF hardcore this league just to test it out, and it thrives in all game modes. It is not a bossing-centric build, but at high enough investment, it can even scale into fighting Ubers. In fact, I was testing him on a league start budget, and I accidentally fought Uber Eater. It took a few portals, but I did down him on a league start budget, though I don't recommend doing that. Also, I'm very happy to announce that a complete written guide with full progression milestones, gear, checkpoints, everything will be on Maxroll very soon. It'll be published sometime this week, and also we are once again working with Havoc 616 for a complete leveling walkthrough video. So look below in the description and pinned comment. They will show up as soon as they are available. All right, without further ado, enjoy. So this is the SRS Guardian. You've probably seen a lot of people talking about it. I've been playing it actually most of this league. I first played it about halfway through the league. I just wanted to experience early league start Guardian. That was my first experimentation with SRS Guardian, was a couple months ago. And I was just blown away by how comfortable this build is, how just cohesive and how efficient it is to put everything together. So starting off, let's talk about the pieces that go into this build and just the general theory behind what's going on. So the first thing is, what is Summon Raging Spirit? So this is a minion skill that's a spell. It has the minion duration and fire tags, which is very useful for scaling our gear right here. And you will summon these skulls. I have the Celestial MTX, so they have little masks on, but it'll summon these little skulls that are by default already aggressive. They have a base physical damage that has a 100% conversion to fire built into the gem itself. Well, it's not on the gem, it's actually on the minion itself, which is also important for damage conversion purposes. You'll summon these little minions here, and they will just go out and destroy your enemies. And that's really the core of it. It's mostly a one-button build, although we do have some additional utility buttons that we do press. For comfort, we have it linked to Unleash support right here, although in the next patch, in the 3.23 patch, we might be able to drop Unleash once you get enough cast speed, because they are adding the new quality for SRS is changing from minion movement speed to 30% chance to summon an additional minion. So the main thing is you can have up to 20 SRS at a time. So you can see this is the Flaming Skull. It can go up to 20, and that's where it caps out. So no matter what, you can only have 20. You see them right here. And also they will go where your cursor is. So you can kind of aim them a little bit, and they will go towards wherever your cursor is, but they'll attack kind of any minion that they find along the way. And to make that a little bit more comfortable, we'll use Unleash here, which will actually kind of queue up a number of skulls. So you see this number 3 right here. That actually is the number of skulls that we'll cast when we use Unleash. It'll go up to 3 seals, and then it'll cast all 3 of them at once. The really nice thing about Unleash here is that less damage when reoccurring doesn't matter, because we're summoning a minion. We're not casting a spell that does damage. So there's actually no downside besides the fact that it's not a more damage multiplier. Then we have it linked to Elemental Focus, minion damage support, melee splash, and elemental damage with attacks. Obviously, we want to go into all of the awakened versions a little bit later. And then when we want to boss, do single target, anything like that, we replace melee splash with multi-strike. And then we can go into awaken minion damage, awaken multi-strike, awaken unleash. We do that to level up. So for gameplay, all we have to do is we're using shield charge and frostwing to get around, very standard. We're casting our summon raging spirits. They go off automatically. They target automatically. You don't even have to worry about aiming it. And then we also have a haste divine blessing. It makes us faster. It makes our minions faster. They attack faster. Now, in terms of the damage, as I mentioned in the intro, what is happening here is we have something called Unwavering Crusade. This is our second skill point that we take around level 50 to 55 when we do Cruel Lab. And it says 25% chance to trigger level 20 summon elemental relic when you or a nearby ally kill an enemy or hit a rare or unique enemy. So you also get uptime during bossing. These relics have a fairly short duration, and they're pretty easy to kill. So they're going to die fairly often. But since you will have ideally 20 skulls out that are attacking and killing very, very quickly, you have a pretty reliable uptime of having these 3 minions. And we can demonstrate this pretty easily. Let's go into a map, and then I can just show you the gameplay really quickly. All right, so if I just cast my SRS right here, they kind of just will fly out and target towards the enemies. No hands-on at all. And this is kind of like the comfortable thing where it feels a little bit like a caster, because you are, assertively going out and actively casting your skills. You're actually summoning your minions actively, and they have a fairly short duration. Currently, mine lasts 8.2 seconds, which is not too bad. As you can see, I don't have to target the enemies. I just kind of go forward and cast my SRS, and they will do all of the rest of the work for me. The other stuff that we have, like I said, is we have Haste, Divine Blessing, making them a little bit faster, makes us faster too. We also have Vol Haste to go even faster on top of that. Speeds us up, speeds our minions up, makes everything feel a lot smoother. And the one other button that you can press that is optional, once you get later on, you probably don't really want to press it too often, is the Sentinel of Radiance. This guy will carry you through leveling. So the leveling this build is arguably the easiest leveling in the entire game. Not the fastest, but I would say the easiest. The reason for that is he is very, very overtuned throughout the entire campaign. There's a bunch of clips of different streamers trying this for the first time, and I made, I think, 2 different videos on how overpowered this guy is this league. Everyone was calling for him to get nerfed, but yeah, I'm happy to say that he was not touched at all outside of Ruthless. He has an Area of Effect Righteous Fire effect that is based on his HP, and so he will do a burning effect to the minions around him. So if I just summon him and I don't even worry about my Righteous Fire, you can see that he can kind of, or my Raging Spirits if I don't summon them, you can see that he does quite a bit of work on his own. This is, you know, no hand on the keyboard. I'm not summoning my my SRS at all. This is just his burning effect, and it's very big. You can see that it hits really, really hard. He will already carry you through T16 maps once you level up. He really is that powerful. Like, I don't have to do anything at all. The burning effect is nearly the entire screen in radius. And then his actual attack is really, really hard. He hits pretty hard. Now, he's not doing a ton of damage. I think in this configuration, he's around maybe 800,000 DPS, something like that. But in terms of making the build very comfortable to play, clearing up the stragglers of the enemies, that's incredibly powerful. Not to mention that he will also taunt enemies, so he will just draw aggro for you. And while he's active, he has a passive effect to make you take 20% less damage from hits. So this is part of the reason why this build is so tanky, because this guy will take 20% of the hits for you. So that's already just very comfortable defensively. That is really all that there is in terms of playing this build. All right, and then to go over the other mechanics and skills that we have, including much more of our minion utility. Starting off, we have the Summon Carrion Golem, which gives us additional physical damage to our SRS, which is really nice. And the real big thing that it gives us is Feeding Frenzy support and Elemental Army. So the Elemental Army, because he has the Hatred, Anger, and Wrath, will apply exposure, so we get that. And then he also has Feeding Frenzy, which makes our minions do more damage and be faster. So he's a nice little utility minion. I have him on middle click right here because he will die periodically. He's not linked to anything defensive. He does have 26,000 life, so he doesn't die very often. But if it's in a very, very rippy map, I might have to resummon him like once or twice during a map. For our mana reservation, we are using Skitterbots, and then combined with that, we're using Profane Proxy. That gives us a shock on the enemies near us, as well as a reliable elemental weakness on all of our enemies. This way, we don't have to actively curse all of the time. And the other benefit here is that it gives us 40% reduced extra damage from critical strikes, because enemies will reliably be cursed all of the time. Then we have Tempest Shield. Since we have a decent amount of block already from our Bastion of Hope, if we've cast a spell recently, we have plus 25 spell block combined with our Tempest Shield. This gives us 50% spell block all the time, as well as shock immunity. Then we have Divine Blessing with Haste. This works in combination with Eldritch Battery because it gives your auras a high mana cost for a temporary buff, which means we can periodically cast Haste, and we get it for about 11 to 12 seconds right now in this configuration. We need enough available mana to be able to cast that, and the only way to do that is with Eldritch Battery, because normally we wouldn't have any mana after reserving any of our auras. The thing to pay attention to here is you do want to have a moderate amount of energy shield on your gear. You will value getting some energy shield on maybe some jewels, maybe your rings, stuff like that. Just a little bit of additional flat energy shield helps a lot, just to make sure that you can cast your haste. And around 600 energy shield is very comfortable for not really having to worry about that. Really high uptime of my aura right there. I'm currently running Grace. This is really personal preference. You can run Grace or Determination. With that said, Determination is actually much, much stronger with damage shifting, but I generally prefer to not get hit in the first place versus, you know, dealing with a small amount of hits that are hitting us. In our boots for utility, I'm using Immortal Call. If you want to, you can run Determination instead of Grace and run Molten Shell. This is entirely personal preference. The math is really, really close in PoB. Set that up how you like. Running Determination with the Granite Flask, I get technically more EHP. But with Grace, I get like 30% more evasion, and just not getting hit in the first place is like really nice. I get 33% more evasion. Frostblink, shield charge, faster attacks, very standard setup right there. And then in our wand, we want to go for the Trigger Craft right here. You get this by unveiling weapons from Betrayal or June missions. This is a suffix that you can craft that is 4 chaos. And what it does is when you cast a spell, which we're doing all the time with our Frostblink and with our Raging Spirits, it will cast the spells in the wand itself. What we want here is Desecrate, which will summon some corpses. This will allow us to have a very high uptime of Flesh Offering, which gives our minions 30% movement, cast, and attack speed. And then we put our second curse in here, which is Punishment, which makes enemies take significantly increased damage below 50% life. Between Profane Proxy and the trigger wand right here, this dramatically reduces the buttons necessary to play this build. By default, as you can see, we have a lot of gems. There's potentially a lot of buttons to press. And until you get the trigger craft, it is kind of uncomfortable, but priority number one is get that trigger craft right away. Once you have that, this will automate all three of these buttons. Profane Proxy is another button. Dramatically reduces the buttons you have to press. And then last up is our Spectre and Animate Guardian setup. So Spectres are enemies that you have killed or, coming from any corpses on the ground that you can summon. Not all enemies can be Spectres, but what we want to do is summon specific Spectres that give us boosts for our character and our Raging Spirits. So the two Spectres that we want to go for, I'll put them on the screen, are the Pale Seraphim and the Arena Master. The Pale Seraphim is from Beyond. It is a pain in the butt to get. Basically what you have to do is have a corpse on the ground, and I'll demonstrate how to do this. We want to take Desecrate, and we want to take our Flesh Offering out too. We don't want to automatically be consuming the corpses. We want to put Desecrate in a different socket so we can actually cast it. You can't cast the ones that are triggered. So we cast our Desecrate right here, and this will actually put corpses on the ground. And then the default key is A. There's a key for corpse targeting. You actually have to have Race Spectre selected here. It has to be on your hotbar. And then by pressing A, you can see that the hitboxes are really goofy. But you basically hold down A, and then you can mouse over, and you can see at the top of the middle of the screen, it'll say the name of the corpse of the minion that you're going to spawn. And so the two that we want to spawn are the Pale Seraphim from Beyond and the Arena Master that comes from Drox maps. The Pale Seraphim, I believe, puts a debuff that makes enemy monsters take 15% increased damage. This stacks additively with the Shock and with the Punishment, so it's nice for additional damage taken. And then the Arena Master, he'll bang his shield and do this AoE buff, which will grant attack, cast, and movement speed buff to you and your minions. He's not that hard to get. Like I said, he just shows up in Drox maps. You can just kill him, and just, whenever you kill a pack of monsters, just kind of hold A and try to find it on the screen. But the Pale Seraphim will disappear very quickly. The Beyond monsters, their corpses go away after just a couple seconds. So you're kind of killing a pack of monsters, holding A, and then you're hoping you see it right away. That's super clunky and annoying. Unfortunately, this is the downside of playing minion builds. I didn't explain it very well in the original recording. So by default, your Desecrate pool right here, when you use Desecrate, will pretty much just have skeletons. To get the Pale Seraphim and to get the Arena Master in your pool, you actually have to go to a map or get it from someone else's Desecrate pool. So you go into a map, you find the Pale Seraphim, you create that Spectre, and then when you go back into your hideout, it will then be locked into your Desecrate pool. And then once you have it, in the future, when your Spectres die, you can go back to your hideout, Desecrate, and resummon the Spectres, or do it in the zone that you went into, the map that you went into. People that already have it in their Desecrate pool, you can go to their hideout, they'll Desecrate for you. You can summon the Spectre yourself, maybe give them a 5 or 10 chaos tip. Then when you go back to your hideout, it will then be in your Desecrate pool. It can be a little funky. Sometimes you can lose a minion from Desecrate pool if you, I don't know all the mechanics. I'm not an expert on this, but if you summon a bunch of other Spectres, there's definitely a limit. You get a bunch of different minions in there. You log out, you log back in, and then you lost your Pale Seraphim, you lost your Arena Master, and then that can be a pain in the butt. But you can see right here, this is the Pale Seraphim. It is a pale spider-like looking monster. And then the Arena Master are these little, these soldier guys that have some shields. And their little buff that they do, they'll slam the shield with their sword, and that'll do a 20% attack, move, and cast speed buff to you and your minions for about 3 or 4 seconds. So it's not 100% uptime, but it's a really nice boost for your character. Quick edit, I'm about to talk about joining Global Channel 6666. I mistyped in the original recording, but you can join Global Chat 6666 to join the minion sharing community for getting your Spectres. All right, back to the video. This is actually the channel where a lot of minion folk hang out. You can go in there and talk to people and ask for, people will share minions. You can give them like a 5-10 chaos tip if you want to. And yeah, great community of people that are just helping each other out. Everyone that plays minions knows how annoying certain parts of it are. This is a very comfy build, but there are definitely annoying parts. They like to help each other out. And it's pretty cool to be part of a community with people helping each other out and all that. And then next up in the world of Clunk is the Animate Guardian. So this is the guy nicknamed Bob. You can see him right here. He's kind of an additional player. So he has his own inventory. He's actually animated gear. As you can see, he has a Dying Breath. He has just a regular rare body armor. He has a Leer cast on. He has regular gloves, and I have him with the Maven Legacy of Fury boots. So he is basically animated gear and he will follow you around. He will grant the buffs. He's like an additional player. He's like an additional party member that will grant the buffs of the gear that he's wearing to your entire party. We have him equipped with the Dying Breath, which is a little bit increased damage and curse damage, as well as curse effectiveness. The Legacy of Fury are really nice for Scorch Ground effect. Those are just nice to have. You get that a little bit later once they become available and cheap. And then the gloves, ideally, we give him the Southbound gloves, which gives him a lot more life. And then the body armor, the easiest thing to do is just a nice defensive body armor with increased life on it. Try to get some chaos res on there. Chaos damage is going to be a kind of a scary thing. Just get his res up, make him nice and comfy, and he won't die at all during maps. So what you actually have to do is drop the gear on the ground and sock it in your Animate Guardian. There will be nothing, right? So you actually have to cast them. If you cast them on no gear, nothing will happen. So you don't have them. But if you cast it on an item, it will consume the item, go on his inventory, and that will be what he is. He is the gear that you animate. I right click on this gear right here, and you'll see that it will get consumed. Yeah, also he only uses melee weapons, so he can't use wands. That was a little mistake that I made right there. But you'll see that there is now a floating body armor, and that's my Animate Guardian. And any buffs that that body armor bestows, that's his gear. Now, if he dies, you lose the gear. There's a craft to save a body armor, but we don't really care about that. If he dies, you'll lose the gear. So the recommended gear that I'm giving you guys is the cheapest stuff possible. Like I said, Southbounds, Dying Breath, Leercast, stuff like that. Legacy Fury is good for a little bit later, but even those, the price goes down very, very quickly, and they become a lot cheaper. But don't worry about that even early on. Just give them some rare boots. Later on, of course, you can go for a Kingmaker, all of that. We're not really worried about that in a League Start guide. All right, so we have our Animate Guardian, we have our Spectres, we have our Carrion Golem, we have our Skitterbots, and like I said, we have our Sentinel of Radiance, and we have all of our Raging Spirits. So as you can see, it is a minion build. It's an active minion build. We have a bunch of utility minions, and that is the core of all the pieces, all the skills, all the gems, and how they work together. So regarding the gear, what we're going to do today is I'm just going to show you very simple League Start gear and a couple of things that you can shoot for upgrades, but we're not going to go into very, very high end. Starting with the wand right here. This is your general basic wand that you want to start with. Let me reference the Maxroll build guide right now. So the primary stuff that scales our build. How do we get more damage? So we want to be going for increased minion damage, gem levels, and Ghastly Eye Jewels with flat physical damage on them. Also attack speed from our minions, making them faster, attack faster. So our basic wand that we would go for, we use an Essence of Fear. Fear essences and bound fossils are going to be your best friend. So Fear right here, you can see guaranteed on a wand, we can get 94% increased minion damage on a wand. You want to start with a convening wand, the minion base type, so it has that minions deal increased damage on the implicit, and I went for +1 minion skill gems. But if instead I hit minions have attack speed, something like that, that would be nearly as good. So those are the main things that we're going for. Again, damage, minion skill gems, and we can also go for +1 fire. And then we always want to have an open suffix for that trigger craft. As you can see, this is an upgraded version. This is my more endgame one. I grabbed a fractured base, I hit it with essences until I hit tier 3 attack and cast speed, crafted the trigger, and that's the upgraded version that you want to shoot for. You know, even better, higher tiers of all that. Ideal wand would be +1 minion, +1 fire, minion damage, tier 1 attack and cast speed, etc. That's your GG wand. This is basically your starter wand that you want to be aiming for ASAP. And then going with that, we want to go for a Spirit Shield that has the minion increased damage on it. And then we want to go for minion skill gem level as well as minion damage. Minion life is kind of nice to have, and minion crit does nothing. Life is nice to have. You can also craft spell suppression on the suffix if you have that openness out of the life. Just very simple shield. Bound fossils are going to be your friend if you're an SSF. That's the way you want to craft it. Just bound fossil, bound fossil, bound fossil. That is the only way to influence and have more chance to get minion modifiers. Some minion modifiers will have like speed on it, so you can reforge speed, something like that. Bound fossils are going to be your best friend for crafting. I have the most basic amulet of all time on right now because this is just the League Start guide. But the ideal amulet is actually, again, +1 all level, +1 fire gem level, stuff like that. That's what you're going to aim for. But this is just your starter basic amulet, just some stats. And then we're going to anoint Inveterate, which gives us 15% chance to suppress spell damage and then +3% suppress spell damages. If you're an SSF and you don't really have access to a gold oil anytime soon, I would recommend for something like Quick Step to just get that spell suppression chance up ASAP. Ring is just a life and res ring, nothing special. The non-channeling craft is really nice, not necessary. As you can see, my mana sustain is really, really good, so I don't need that at all. Like I said at the beginning, a little bit of energy shield goes a long way. I do recommend that just to make it more comfortable to keep your divine blessing up. Boots, just regular stat boots. Ideally, we would have spell suppression on these, but these are just, you know, League Start Rod Crafted boots. I like life regen rate and action speed. You could go for Scorched Ground if you want to do that before Legacy of Fury. Give yourself a little bit more damage, but that also requires you to run underneath the enemy. It's a little weird because you're summoning minions that are going out. So, I think the Scorched Ground is kind of silly, but you can do that if you really want to min-max your damage. Gloves, very simple. Spell Suppression, Life, Res, just the standard go-to. On the Implicits, we want to go for Spell Suppression and minion damage. And the helmet is the same story as well. We want to go for Spell Suppression, Life. We want to have the Corel helmet craft. This is a Corel prefix. You get that from unveiling helmets from Corel-based helmets in June and Betrayal. Then we also want to go for physical damage from hits taken as fire, and minions have increased movement speed. So you could go for Elemental Weakness Curse Effect, something like that. However, next league, we are losing the minion movement speed from quality. Minion movement speed is really nice to have just for quality of life of your Raging Spirits kind of going all over and hitting everything. Like I said before, Profane Proxy with our curse in it is just really nice to have. Reducing the buttons required to play the build, strongly recommend. And then Lightning Coil, I think, is just way too good. I know some people were making arguments for going more armor-based, but I did the math in PoB, and just 50% physical taken as lightning. This turns out being 37% flat less physical damage taken. I was not able to get to the same PDR, the same Physmax hit, going into armor for the same investment as I could with just a lightning coil. Between the lightning coil and the physical damage taken on our helmet, and then later on a Taste of Hate, we can basically totally ignore any other physical damage. And if you want to juice that up even higher, you can go into a Dawnbreaker, etc. There's a lot of options to make it, if you want to get like 20, 25k Physmax hit, you absolutely can. Dawnbreaker with a Ruby Flask as well. And the really nice thing about the lightning coil is it is a unique that is pretty common. If we look at the historical price data, Lightning Coil peaked at 10 chaos this entire league. So it's really not a problem. It's really, really easy to get body armor. It's a little annoying to farm an SSF. I've done it. You can use the Coming Storm right here, which drops in these maps. Just look it up on the wiki. It is 8 cards to get. It could take you a few days in SSF to farm, but it is just way too good in my opinion. And then the benefit is you can start corrupting them. Once it gets down to 10, 20 chaos, you just keep buying them, keep corrupting them until you get something like plus level of socketed minion gems. You can also get plus level of socketed duration gems. So there's 2 different implicits that you can go for, and it's a very cheap and easy way to get a nice power boost, a couple weeks into the league once the price goes way down on lightning coils. Okay, and I've been waiting for this one last because this kind of goes into our final scaling stage for the build. And that is scaling Ghastly Eye Jewels with flat physical damage and minion attack speed on them every single where that we can get it. So the big thing that we want to go for here is a Darkness Enthroned. So this is an 82% roll one that I just got out of a Voidborn Reliquary key that I opened up. You can see that the roll is between 50 and 100% increased effect of socketed Abyss Jewels. So what this does is it can give you up to double, so this is a perfectly roll one, up to double of the effect of what's in there. So for example, this says plus 10 strength and dexterity. In this one, it would actually give me plus 20 strength and dexterity, and you can have 2 of them. So for example, I have one that has 50% chance to avoid being shocked. In here, this already gives me 100% chance to avoid being shocked. I could just drop in a Storm Shroud and fully Ailment Immune just like that. And that's the power of the Darkness Enthroned. Now, price of a perfectly rolled Darkness Enthroned is high. I think I bought this for 10 divines just a few weeks ago. Perfectly rolled one will always be pretty expensive. However, you can just run Abyss, and it drops pretty reliably, fairly often when you do get the Abyssal Lich. So if you just put the points into, if you're an SSF, you want to go for the points right here for additional chance for Abyssal Depth. Just run Abyss, and pretty much most of the time when you fight the Lich down there, you'll get a Darkness Enthroned. It's a very high drop rate, and you can get everything from 50 to 100% roll. Higher is the better. And then the jewels that we're looking for here are primarily minions deal additional physical damage. The higher the roll on the additional physical damage, the better. The reason for this is because, again, we have Hatred, Anger, and Wrath. Remember, they have base physical damage, and the Hatred will get that 15% Fizz as extra cold. And then we're scaling that cold damage, because Hatred double dips and is cheating. However, any flat damage at all is good. Primarily we do prefer elemental damage. So even flat lightning damage is fine. We are scaling minion damage kind of generically. The other mod that's really nice is this one right here. Minions deal increased damage if you've used a minion skill recently. You've always used one recently because you're always casting your Summon Raging Spirits. So even a jewel like this has flat fire, flat lightning, and increased damage recently. This is a great jewel as well. The 2 mods that you're really prioritizing, flat physical damage, increased damage if it used recently, and then the other flat elemental is fine. The chaos is okay, but you don't really care about that as much. And yeah, that's generally what you're going to be going for on the jewels. And that's kind of our main scaler, actually. Once you have the minion skill levels, the minion increased damage on your gear, the only real other way to scale it is pushing those Ghastly Eye Jewels as high as possible. And that's what you're going to go for. So you're going to go for a higher roll Darkness Enthroned. You're going to get those jewels in there and you're good to go. Oh yeah, in terms of helmet, remember, there's no helmet enchants next league, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. And yeah, we don't know about alternate quality gems or whatever, transfigured gems. We don't know about those at all. So don't worry about those. Although they did show transfigured Animate Guardian that has smite, which would be very, very good. Do recommend that, because that smite will do an AoE plus lightning damage to all of your minions. So, you know, grab that one if you can. All right, next up in terms of flasks, I recommend a Divine Life Flask of removing bleed. Later on, you do want to get a Corrupted Blood Ghastly Eye Jewel, but until you get that, you know, this is your bleed removal as well. Topaz Flask, really, really good in combination with the Lightning Coil. This actually provides not only additional less physical damage taken effectively, right, because we're shifting it to lightning damage, but also just generically less lightning damage taken, which is really good for those stupid donut monsters. Quartz Flask for phasing, a little bit more spell suppression is nice to have. Jade Flask with increased evasion, as well as a Quicksilver Flask with increased movement speed. And then obviously, you know, increased effective movement speed would be better as well. For a stretch goal later on, you want to get a Taste of Hate, ideally with a perfect 15% physical damage from hits taken as cold damage. This will increase the amount of physical damage that we are shifting. So our big defensive layer here for physical damage is we are shifting the initial physical damage to elemental, and then that will go against our elemental resistance. And the more that we can shift, the less actual physical damage is hitting our armor or whatever is the layer behind that. And then you can stack that with even more flat fizz taken on your Pantheon, flat fizz on a shield, you know, even more shifting if you want a Dawnbreaker, and you can become very, very strong against physical damage. That's our nice little segue into the defenses. So we'll start off with the physical damage. That is primarily, as I just said, all of this physical damage shifting. And then behind that physical damage, we can actually boost that even more by running Determination instead of Grace. Like I said earlier, I prefer to just take fewer hits in the first place, but if you want to just ensure that your Fizzmax hit is a little bit better, you can run Determination instead. Against spells, we have chance to suppress spell damage. On our helmet, boots, and gloves, ideally we want to get as much spell suppression as we can, up to 14% chance, but that can be kind of hard to hit. It's actually easier to roll it on pure evasion base. You can Rogcraft, whatever, just try to get some spell suppression on your gear. Ideally, you would get to 100%. So you can see right here, I have 66%, but we have this mastery right here that says chance to suppress spell damage is lucky, which is if you play D&D, it's rolling with advantage. It will roll twice and take the better roll. So we can see mathematically, let's turn off my Quartz Flask right here. If I turn off the Lucky Mastery in PoB, my gear's a little bit different in PoB, but you can see I have 60% chance to suppress spell damage. But if I take the Mastery, roll with advantage, that 60 goes to 84%. And if I turn on my Quartz Flask, it actually gets even better, and it goes up to 91% effective chance. You know, that's the mathematical probability curve of how much I'm actually suppressing my spell damage. Now, obviously, I would prefer 100%, and next patch, we can actually get that a lot easier with the new jewels that they showed off with the new Ascendancies. And that spell suppression, in addition to our 56% spell block, actually feels pretty darn comfortable. Granted, yeah, you can get really unlucky and a very big hit could come through, but we have a decent max hit, and I'm not too worried about that outside of, you know, if you take a huge uber hit or something, right? If we just added a little bit more spell suppression on our gear, we could get very close to 100%, and then you're very, very comfortable. And then Pantheons, Brine King, this gives us our freeze immunity, really good to also not get stun locked. And then either Abrath or Growthcool are both perfectly good. Less physical damage taken is great, slowing them down a little bit, or just you need that burning ground immunity if you're doing red altars, so obviously you know about that. All right, in terms of the passive tree right here, it is a very, very standard passive tree. The PoB, I have a leveling tree right here. We do recommend leveling with Rolling Magma. I did test leveling with SRS, and you can do that if you want to. It was really fine, actually, during the regular encounters, but the bossing, it just didn't have the damage to make the bosses too comfortable until you got your Ascendancy. However, once you get your first Ascendancy, you get the Radiant Crusade notable. Kind of doesn't matter what you're doing. And I recommend around level 30, once you get Enduring Bond right here, this makes your minions last 20% longer. This helps a lot. Also gives them a lot more damage, increased skill duration. Once you get Enduring Bond, recommend swapping over to SRS. We have a drop down right here for SRS swap. So Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and then swapping over to SRS right here, and then the final skill setup right here. Like I said, I recommend Rolling Magma. It just feels way too good. Like, Zaro was not fun with SRS. If he had all the extra minions that he summoned, it'll just make your whole life easier until you get your Radiant Crusade. Once you get that, once you get Enduring Bond, swap over to SRS. And the nice thing about this is the rest of the time, you're just building out the same utility, the same bits and pieces. There's nothing new. There's no curveballs happening. You're just like, okay, now Carrion Golem's unlocked. Unleash is unlocked in Act 4. Grab those. But you're just putting additional pieces onto what you already have. Skill tree is very standard. You're going to basically zip right over to Spiritual Aid ASAP. This will give you a really nice minion damage boost. And then once you swap over to SRS, you're going to swap out of Spiritual Aid, fill up on the right side Righteous Armory. You're going to unspec Light of Divinity. And then the rest of the way, you're just kind of filling this out. Take these masteries. These masteries are pretty much mandatory, particularly this accuracy rating. The convocation cooldown rate, you can use convocation on left click. Your big Radiant Sentinel will just follow you around and just kill the whole screen. Put convocation on left click. You're going to unspec that later because we don't use convocation later on. And then you want to go for Grave Pact, fill out these nodes right here, and then finally go up to Eldritch Battery. It allows you to run your haste Divine Blessing. And that is it. Other notable thing is switch melee splash with multi-strike for your single target. And then once you've decided that you've exhausted everything you want to do in like a solo self-found, don't want to do cluster jewels type of setup, then we do want to go into some cluster jewels that provide a lot of value for this build. And to do that, I do recommend getting out of these nodes over here. What this does is it frees up a lot of points. This brings me down to level 79. And then we want to put a large cluster jewel right here. I recommend just doing an 8 passive large cluster jewel. Some people do a full 12 passive minion, 35% increased effect, attack and cast speed. Yeah, if you want to super min-max it, but it's really not necessary. Then what you want to do is get a medium cluster jewel. This is the whole reason why we're doing it. On the large cluster jewel, increased damage, attack and cast speed, whatever, a little bit of life, some res. Those are always good to have. You don't really care about what you roll on here. Renewal is nice to have, chance for double damage. All we're doing this for is to get to Blessed Rebirth. Minions get 20% increased life, but also minions created recently cannot be damaged. That's 4 seconds for your Summon Raging Spirits to not take any damage after you summon them. This is so much quality of life if you're fighting, you know, a ton of degen on the ground and just all this AoE effect and everything. Keeps your minions alive, and it's way easier to sustain your 20 Raging Spirits. Strongly recommend. Dread March is also really good. There's a bunch of other medium cluster jewel ones that are really good. So, you know, anything that says minion damage, anything like that's good to have. Dread March is really nice because it also gives chaos res to your Animate Guardian, you know, keep him alive a little bit better. Also 10% PDR. And then in these jewel sockets, again, we just put this minion fizz damage. Just get a little bit more of these fizz damage jewels, and you'll notice that my damage went from, I think I was at 3.8 million DPS, and now I'm at 4.8 million DPS. So, you know, 25% more damage by going into a cluster jewel setup without losing too much defense. And this is kind of your final setup that you want to go into. And the build is basically put together. From here, you just want to go for more minion levels. You can go for +2 minion level on your helmet. I may have missed mentioning that. Oh yeah, on the helmet. Ideally, it's really hard to hit. Spring for a fractured version or even non-fractured and craft the rest of the helmet up. +2 level of minion skill gems is really good. You know, +1 is really easy to get. That's kind of your interim one. And then you go for +2, Perfect Darkness Enthroned, Better Wand. Then you can go for a double corrupted lightning coil, +2 minion, +2 duration, all of that. You can shoot for the stars. And like I said, this build does scale, you know, Awakened Gems, get all the Awakened Gems like this. The build does scale into being able to kill Ubers. And also, benefit, let's go over the tiny little changes that I recommend for 3.23 Affliction League. So first off is we probably don't need Unleash. Summon Raging Spirit actually is getting a new quality that is the Old Helmet Chant. So the Old Helmet Chant was 24% chance to summon an additional Raging Spirit. This is actually going to go to 30% at 20% quality on the gem itself, which means that, you know, the reason why we're using Unleash is we're trying to maintain those 20 Raging Spirits at once. But if we can sustain that without using the Unleash gem, well, we get an additional damage link, and that will give us about 30% more damage. The easiest gem to put in there would be something like Ruthless. Yeah, it looks like Ruthless is actually our best gem that you can put in. And as you can see, I go from 4.8 million DPS to 6.4 million DPS. And remember, this is with absolute, you know, league start gear. And so we can scale this a lot higher. We can very easily get over 10 million DPS with this build. And it gets very comfortable. So I think we'll probably be dropping Unleash. I think you still want Unleash early on, but you'll probably drop that later. Instead of going for Awaken Unleash, you'll just go for Ruthless once you get 20% quality. And the other thing is we haven't seen all of the charms yet, but this one has me really excited. This is the Pathfinder's Lupine Charm of the Raider. If you don't know, there are 3 new ascendancies that you can pick, and one of them is the Wildwood Primalist, which has 3 sockets in it. So all sorts of wacky stuff is going to happen. But it has 3 sockets in it that give you the ability to put in these charms that have the effects of other ascendancies. So you get like baby versions of the other ascendancies. Just looking at this, you can see how strong this is. We get 3 of these. I think this one's going to be really expensive and hard to get, but they are tradable. You can buy them. 3 of these, 27% chance to suppress spell damage. Boom, we're at 100%. And then magic utility flasks applied have 15% increased effect, 45% stronger topaz and ruby flasks, making that shifted damage way, way stronger. So just looking at this, I think being able to equip 3 of these is going to be incredibly powerful, and that's what you're going to want to be looking for. You know, something like this. On League Start, I'm going to play this build. I will have daily videos on everything that I discover, all of my findings, so you can follow along with me. You know, get subscribed if you want, all of that stuff. I'm really, really excited to League Start this build. I think that's a good place. I think we're basically wrapped up right now. I don't think there's anything that I missed off the top of my head. The key with this build is that it kind of just works. You know, as long as you follow the absolute basics, you don't even have to do it perfectly. As long as you follow the absolute basics, you just level it up. Normally, as soon as you swap to SRS, you get the Radiant Sentinel out right here. He will, it literally feels like cheating. He will carry you through the axe. This is a really strong League starter. There's a reason why everyone's recommending it, and I'm really happy to play it myself and share with you guys this build guide. And just as a little bit of a teaser, here's a little bit of my written guide on Maxroll. It's got a lot of detail. It's really, really long. I spent like 12 hours on it. So it's got everything that you could want. You know, this video is really just meant to be complimentary to that written guide. If you have any other questions, please check there first. Hopefully everything that you could want is answered. And if not, let me know in the comments below, and I will fill it out in a pinned comment below, and I will update the Maxroll guide and make sure it has all of the knowledge that we need in it, so that you guys can have the best league start that you've ever had. That's my goal. Every league, I want you guys to just have better and better league starts, and this one's a doozy. I love my Frostwing Elementalist. It's incredibly fun to play, but in terms of just being really, really just defensively oriented and scale with 0 gear, this build's pretty special. I got to get to editing this video. Just looking at the recording time, this one's going to be a doozy. So I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for watching this long, and I can't wait to see you guys on League Start. All right, have a good one.